As the president tweeted, though, we'll be meeting with Secretary Mnuchin later today, as well as with Larry Kudlow and others at the White House to begin formalizing some of the thoughts that we have about what we might do to make sure that this important industry makes it all the way through this pandemic. I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, so I won't be making news here, but we will be looking at some of the, some of the lending authorities and facilities that have already been created and make sure that our important energy industry are made part of those types of programs. So, we're going to be meeting later today to discuss exactly this.
Is the energy industry excluded from those programs? So right now we've had the small business program up and running. We've just talked to a Texas bank CEO about half an hour ago who said he's in San Antonio, so not the heart of the energy patch, but only 3% of his loans requests came from energy. So clearly energy could take some part in this. They weren't left out. And then the Main Street lending program through the Fed, is that even up and running yet? And could energy take part in that? But that's only for companies with more than 500 employees, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we wanted to make sure that we can get these guys some availability to this liquidity that's being provided by the Congress and by the Treasury Department. I don't know that they've been specifically excluded in some cases. We just want to ensure that they are, to the extent they can be included. With regard to bank loans and things like that, we want to ensure that they're not being, discriminated against in some respects. We have some banks, we've already heard some stories about banks who don't want to lend to fossil fuel industry players, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. This entire industry needs to come back, make it all the way through this pandemic, because as you well know from your conversations, not only with the industry but with other market players, energy underpins everything that we do in the economy. It's such an important component to our national economy, and we want to make sure these guys are strong on the other end of this pandemic.
Yeah, no, I think that people often overlook that if we don't have a strong energy industry with low prices, that it's going to exacerbate income inequality. The people who need to spend a very low amount on that won't be able to. They'll have to pay more. Let me read you an email that just came into my inbox. When we said that you were coming up, it says no to oil bailout, exclamation point. At some point, all the bailouts have to stop. I can't tell you how many emails and tweets and so forth I get of this nature, because people not only are tired about bailouts, quote unquote, but especially because this is oil and gas, think it's not deserving.
That's correct. Yeah, we've heard the same thing. But the things that we've taken, the steps the president's directed me to take, for instance, to open up the strategic reserve, those are not bailouts. In no way, shape, or form are they bailouts. What we're doing is making the nation stronger by, filling up the strategic reserve at a time in which it makes economic sense to do so. We've got a long history in the U.S. government of buying high and selling low. The president recognizes that and says we're going to do exactly the opposite. If we can buy some of this oil at a really good price and fill up the strategic reserve, that's a good thing for us to do. It also, the byproduct of that, is it allows some producers in the U.S. market to store some of this oil, because as we talked about just a minute ago with the ETFs, one of the challenges we're seeing all across the market is that there's no place to put this increased production. And if we can alleviate some of that or mitigate some of that immediate pain for this industry, then we should do so. It benefits the industry, yes, but it also benefits the nation. It makes us more energy secure.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, appreciate you coming on. Good to chat with you again. Two questions. Number one, under what Treasury or Fed program are you guys discussing any aid? Would it be the secondary market corporate credit facility? Would it be the TALF program? Would it be something else? Also, when we look at energy itself, you referenced the ETF. Has there been any high-level discussion about any kind of a potential ETF aid program should we see numerous contracts slide negative and a major ETF become in trouble?
Too early to tell, Brian. I can't get ahead of the Secretary. We haven't yet had a detailed conversation about this, so I don't want to. I want to get ahead of the conversation that we're yet to have, and we will start later today. So, with all due respect and with your forbearance, I'd like to pass on that question. But we do want to understand what's happening in the marketplace, specifically with regard to ETFs. We don't have any perfect answers. We're still trying to figure out and sort through what's happened over the last 2 days. I mean, as you well know from your extensive coverage of the industry, this is an extraordinary event. I don't know of anyone, at least in my circle of friends or at least in my circle of influence, who has ever experienced anything like this. So we're all learning at the same time.
Yeah, Brian, do you want to ask a follow-up? Because I have one more, but I want you to finish.
I do, yeah. Because I just received a text message from Austria, and want to know if you had any message for OPEC.
Well, Message for OPEC. No, we're going to continue to work with them. We had some good conversations over the course of the last 3 weeks with regard to their production numbers, and we were successful in getting them to back away from some of the announcements they made in early March to increase production at this time in which the pandemic was just beginning to take effect. So, we're going to continue those types of conversations with our friends overseas. We're also going to continue our friends with the Australians. We've made our storage available. We hope other nations will do the same. We're working closely with Dr. Fatih Birol, who heads up the International Energy Agency in Paris. We're going to be working with him to see if there are other partners around the world that might have storage available and can make it available. We think that's important for nations to do right now.
My question, Mr. Secretary, is related to that. Is collusion about the oil price in this country legal? In other words, we just spoke with the Texas Rail Commission earlier this hour, who said they'd be willing to prorate or kind of cut production if it's in conjunction with North Dakota, with Oklahoma, with Canada. Listen, I know we can kind of bend the rules to what we think is of vital importance here, but is there any chance that all of this discussion would somehow be against the rules, so to speak?
Well, the antitrust rules are pretty clear. We cartel-type activity in the United States, collusive activity with the intent of affecting a price of a product, that's clearly illegal. So we're not going to engage in that sort of conversation. With regard to state regulators, however, the Texas Railroad Commission being perhaps the primary example of this, there are state laws that allow states to take individual action that limit the amount of production within their geographic borders. If the Railroad Commission chooses to pursue that as an option, they're quite free to do so. Whether they can do it in conjunction with other states remains a bit of a murky area. We have had in years past an interstate compact that's made up of a number of states that get together from time to time to talk about energy issues, energy matters within their states. Whether or not they can actually collude to set a price, that's a pretty gray area, pretty murky area. It's not something that, I think most Americans would want to see occur here in the United States.
So what do you think the most likely form of aid to the oil and gas industry is? Simply that they use existing facilities to gain aid like anybody else, or is there more targeted support that you would consider?
No, I think, I think the having access to what Congress has already passed is the most logical step forward. Doing the things that we can do, either through the U.S. Department of Energy, working in concert with our partners at the Department of Interior, other places where we might be able to expand storage and alleviate some of the immediate pain that we see in the marketplace. Those are the logical, common sense steps that we can take. I'll be working closely with Congress to see if we might be able to expand the infrastructure of our strategic reserve. We are authorized to store up to 1 billion barrels of oil there, so we'll work with them closely and see if there's any appetite for expanding that storage capability.
Interesting. Like you said, the government trying to buy low, maybe sell high.